Alright guys, last video for the day, a quadruple upload! Eat your heart out, quartering. I do 4 videos a day, you scrub. No, but all serious, I love his channel, I love his videos, I'm just stirring him. But let's jump into it, and I don't want anybody to go to his channel and tease him, for God's sake. Don't do that, well that would be funny. But anyway, moving along, support among Australians for growing population is crumbling amid fears of overcrowded cities, homes priced out of reach of ordinary people. A new survey by the Australian National University has revealed. It's funny, they also didn't talk about the fact that people are too scared to leave their house at night because they're going to get robbed or shot or bumped on the head by a bunch of high melatonin people. But moving along, as both Morrison government and the Chute opposition consider their own approaches to population policy in the run-up to this year's election. Yes, we're having another election in Australia. Yippee! Yay! Whoa! The ANU poll found that just 3 out of 10 Australians believe the nation needs more people. Yeah, it's kind of funny that, isn't it? 7 out of 10 don't. But anyway, a similar poll conducted in 2010 found support for growing population at 45%. So even wasn't a majority then. Yet, for some reason, we've had a population growth in the past 8 years, even though the majority did not want it by their own admission. It's funny that, isn't it? The 15% point foliage was driven by a huge drop in support among male voters who in 2010 showed majority support for bigger Australia. Male support has now fallen to 38.4%. I'd like to talk to these 38.4%. I really, really would. Tell you some hard-earned facts. In 2010, 38.5% of female voters backed a growing population, but this has now fallen to 28.2%. You're all sexist, women. You're racist. You don't want migrants. Don't see that narrative coming along, do we? Over the past year, the nation's population has grown by 390,000 people, which was 61% of what it was net overseas migration. 61% was from net overseas migration, which is why we're having such a problem with overseas criminals coming to Australia. Just saying. You start importing the third world into your country, it starts turning into a third world. Who would have thought? Moving along. But with growing population concerns about Australian immigration intake, the government is considered a reduction in the current cap of 190,000 people. Yes, the Conservative government that we have at the moment, and I use that term very loosely, plans to take its ceiling cap was 190,000 people last year. That's a Conservative government for you. This is what I mean when I say that we have a left-wing government and a far left-wing government. We have a left-wing government and a far left-wing opposition government, to be honest. 160,000 people were the actual numbers that came to Australia. 190,000 was the cap. God damn it, they missed out on that 30,000 people. Like, whoop-de-doo. The planned intake for the 2019 to 2020 financial year, set to be in the April budget, is expected to be closer to the 160,000 people, which is what we took last year. It's not a real big difference, is it? Your ceiling cap is 160,000, which is what we took anyway. So, let's not go on about dropping the migration numbers. Already, Prime Minister Scott Morrison has signalled a reduction in the number of migrants brought into the country, saying he heard loud and clear the city roads were clogged, the buses and trains are full. Yes, that's what people are worried about. People are worried about migrants coming in their country and blocking roads and buses and trains. They're not worried about the obscene amount of crime that we're seemingly getting, an overrepresentative amount of crime that we are getting from a certain persuasion of our migrant takers. Or intake, sorry. This appears much of the drop in support for Australia has been driven by the issues in our major cities, which have largely absorbed the 2.5 million increase in the nation's population since 2010. Almost 9 out of 10 surveyed agreed that the higher cost of housing was reason to limit Australia's population growth. 85% also believed the nation's cities were overcrowded and there was too much traffic. Another concern among those surveyed was around labour shortages. And I'm sure the crime never came up, right? I'd love to see the data on this. I really, really would. About 90% of those quizzed agreed that Australia should train our own skilled people and not take them from other countries. Lead researcher Nicholas Biddle, I might be mispronouncing, said with 2/3 of Australians believe the country has enough residents, and lived experience from many people was influencing their views towards immigration. And when you mean the lived experience of many people was influencing their view, do you might mean crime? But anyway, Australia is more likely to support population growth if it increases our skill-based migrants, mitigates the impact of an aging population, and increases our economic prosperity, Associated Professor Biddle said. But they do not want population growth to cause crowding, affordability, jobs, or security issue, or expense of our natural environment. Yeah, I'm sure people are more worried about the natural environment than crime. Moving on. It's the Sydney Morning Herald, people. It's far left. Come on. The poll concluded late last year, just as the housing prices were falling in most major capital cities within Sydney, property were down more than 11%. Mind you, you still can't buy a house for $1 million. The poll is at odds with an ISO poll taken in October last year for the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, which shows 52% of respondents backing the idea of keeping or increasing the number of immigrants. It really does depend on who you ask, doesn't it? It really does. 45% supported a reduction in the nation's immigrant intake. I'm really thinking that could be a fake poll, but anyway. You know, those lovely polls that they do. Responding to the ANU poll, coalition voters were the least likely to support a high population, while Green voters were the most open to the idea. Yes, because the Greens are stupid. But even among them, support was less than 50%. God damn, you can't even get 50% with your own vote, your own far left party. People aged between 25 to 34 showed the highest support for more Australians, and more than 41%. The lowest support was among the people between the ages of 45 to 54 and less than 25%. The survey also found largely differences based on ethnic background. Just a quarter of Australian-born people support a large population, almost half the rate of these born in non-English speaking countries. Just under 40% of those from English-speaking nations backed a larger population. The government is considering a way of encouraging immigrants to live in rural and regional areas, with some country towns crying out for skilled workers. The poll showed that this was more popular among urban Australians, and those living in the areas would be home to new residents. Yeah, wait for them to all start coming up and causing problems with your city. Then we'll see how much you like them. Support among coalition and Green voters for the policy was about 75%, but Labor voters, it was around 10% points lower. Yeah, Labor doesn't want to go putting out the migrants into the desert because they might get hurt. Professor Biddle said there was a survey showed growing opposition to migration. Those quizzed were not driven by cultural issues. Yeah, sure they were. He said there was substantially more support for immigration on the grounds of broadening Australia's cultural diversity, among double the rate for those who believed the nation was already too culturally diverse. According to the Professor Biddle, Australia had a series of serious concerns about growing population. Australia needs to be convinced that traffic and housing prices won't increase unduly, which they will, and there will be a limit effect of the environment, and that the Australia's existing workforce will still receive adequate training, he said. And there's no link to this poll anywhere, is there? No. Interesting. Look, at the end of the day, okay, so obviously, the more migrants you get into your country, the more you are to go through and actually have higher housing prices, higher cost of living, higher roads costs, obviously taxes and everything goes up. Especially when you start getting and importing the third world into your country. They generally live on Centrelink. They generally don't get jobs. I think it was around 60% of migrants still are unemployed after X amount of years. These were from migrant countries. You have to pay for them. You have to pay for them somehow. And guess what? It's your taxes that do it. So your taxes go up, your cost of living goes up because of housing shortage, supply and demand. Power prices go up because of supply and demand. Food costs go up because of supply and demand. Your rates go up, which they constantly have in Australia every year, which nobody has worked out yet, or a few people have worked out yet, is due to population increase. Look, there's a whole series of bad effects from increasing your population and keep increasing it. Now, obviously, when it's done naturally with people just having kids and stuff, it's not so bad. But you start bringing in 160,000 people every year for 8 years, and all of a sudden you have a bit of an issue. You have a boom in the population. Now, the problem is that at the end of the day, next year they have to bring in more people again because those people they brought in last year are going to be retiring sooner or later. So they have to keep bringing in more and more people to help set the migration that they've already brought in. It's a never-ending cycle. What you need to do is encourage people, Australians, to have more children. That would be the best thing. Get rid of this whole feminism, woman power sort of stuff that causes women to get into the workforce and not have kids. This is all cancer. It really, really is. Look, feminism is great. I'm all for empowering women. But at the end of the day, men can't have babies. And we need men and I need women to have babies so that they can go through and replace the population. We already talked about yesterday that over in America, every state in America has a lower population replacement rate than what is needed to replace themselves for the white population. So, yeah, this is a problem that we do need to talk about, and this is a problem that we need people to start having kids. We need to stop bringing in all these migrants from third world countries. We need to start bringing in migrants that are similar to our cultural values. There is a whole bunch of South African farmers, white South African farmers right now, that are screaming for a place to run to because they're being shot, murdered, whatever it may be. The Australian government is not interested in them, but we'll take a whole bunch of the black people instead. Why are you not taking the people that are victimized in their own country, and why are you taking the people that are doing the victimizing over them? It really does boggle the brain, doesn't it? Because let me know your thoughts are in the comment section below. What are your thoughts on Australia not wanting more migrants? Do you think the overwhelming majority of people are against it? Do you think that crime in Australia is something they don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole? And they probably admitted from this article because, oh, God forbid. I find it very interesting that was not mentioned in this poll, and I'd love to see the original poll. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. If this video has been helpful, please smack a like. If you're new, channel, welcome and subscribe. Apart from that, guys, I'll see you in the next demonetized video from YouTube. Have a great day and enjoy.